Well, good evening, or I should say good night, everyone. My name is Elijah Williams, and I am your National Urban League Young Professionals Treasurer. We have a very distinguished guest with us here today. A good friend of mine, good friend of young professionals, and I think a very good friend of the Urban League, Houston City Controller Ronald Green, who's joining us. And so we'll talk a little bit to Ron in a few and give him a proper introduction. But want to invite our national president, Ms. Brandy. Well, good evening, or I should say good night, Ms. Brandy Richards, to everyone. My name is Elijah Williams, and I am your National Urban League Young Professionals Treasurer. We have a very distinguished guest with us here today. A good friend of mine, good friend of. Sorry about. Okay, I'm back on. All right, technical difficulties. I'll restore it. I want to invite our national president, Ms. Brandy Richards, to share a few words about NULYP as well as Join Week, and just kind of welcome everyone. Brandy.
Thank you, Treasurer Williams, and thank you for putting together this great evening event for the chapters and for the treasurers in particular. I am really honored that we would have someone who has been elected so many times to elected office in Houston to just share with us and share with the treasurers. I was looking at his bio and his website and found that he is a watchdog over city finances, which I thought was interesting. You guys are watchdogs over your chapter's finances, and while he manages a way larger budget, I'm sure that he can provide you with some tools and tricks to make sure that not only are we being transparent in how we handle our finances, but we're also making really good financial decisions about the money that people donate to our organizations to get things done. And so I'm really honored that he was able to join us on this evening. I think you're in for a treat. I'd like to thank all of you for your great work on Join Week this week. We are really pleased to be bringing more members into the organization. And I was in New Orleans this past weekend and talked to their members and potential members about joining, and we actually closed some members. So hopefully, if you are the treasurer from New Orleans and you're on, you're really excited about the new members who have paid their dues to join your organization. And hopefully you treasurers are closing memberships across the country as we speak. So thank you so much, Elijah, for giving me an opportunity, and I will turn it back over to you.
All right, thank you, President Richards. Next order of business, right before I introduce Mr. Ronald Green, Chair Merriweather, can you share some insight with our folks in terms of how to ask questions tonight and what hashtag social media stuff we're using?
Absolutely. We are actually using hashtag WeGotNow. Hashtag WeGotNow, and on Twitter you can find us at NULYP or the hashtag. We will be looking for questions at both.
Okay.
And if you, I'll also check the NULYP Facebook. Should you have easier access to that, I'll check there periodically as well.
Okay, sounds good. So let's get started. So I want to introduce Ron, and I typically don't like reading this kind of stuff, but I think he has a pretty great bio, and I think it's pretty good for folks to really understand his body of work. So I'll go ahead and read some of the highlights as an introduction. Ronald Green was elected to the Houston City Council in December of 2009 as Houston City Controller in December 2009 after serving 3 terms on the Houston City Council as an at-large member. He was re-elected twice and just started his 3rd and final term as Houston City Controller in January of this year. As a City Council member, he chaired the Budget and Fiscal Affairs Committee and oversaw the city's annual budget of nearly $4 billion. As controller, Mr. Green oversees about $13 billion debt portfolio and over $2 billion in investments. So, nice sum of cash that he's responsible for in terms of being sure that our folks in the city of Houston are being good stewards of tax dollars. Some additional stuff about Mr. Green: he's a native of Houston, earned his bachelor's degree and MBA from the University of Houston, as well as a law degree from Texas Southern University, Thurgood Marshall School of Law. And he's also a licensed real estate broker. He has his own law firm and is a good brother of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, as well as 100 Black Men, and numerous other civic and professional organizations. He's married to Judge Green and has a son, and they all reside in the great city of Houston, Texas. So, as I mentioned before, I want to introduce you guys to, I think, a good friend of young professionals, at least was my experience back in Houston, and definitely good friend of the Urban League, Houston City Controller Ronald Green.
Thank you very much, Elijah. Thank you, Madam President, for allowing me to spend a little time with you all today. You know, my story is not unlike any of your stories, and with that said, I want to thank you all for giving of your time, your talent, and your toil, really to get involved in the community. I'm a firm believer that in any given city, especially a big city, there are only about 250 of us black people who really work in these organizations. And if you're like me, I've been involved in NULYP. Unfortunately, they kicked me out when I turned 40, but I still have an affinity for young people, especially the ones who think that I'm younger than I am. But the thing is, I tell you that getting involved at this stage of life is probably the best thing, because obviously you're working on your quality of life for later on. So with that said, NULYP for me is really the training ground for the next controllers, the next city council members, the next just people who are involved in their communities. My story, as I said before, is not so unlike any of yours. I just found myself being tremendously blessed with education, tremendously blessed with a community that supported me. And I was involved in my community way before I got involved in politics. And my wife, who's also a judge and holds public office in the city, when we were both young lawyers and bought our first house, and we bought a house in an urban neighborhood. All of our neighbors were older. We were the youngest ones in the neighborhood. But we said that if we want this neighborhood to grow and we want this neighborhood to attract young people and to really continue to be a vibrant part of the city, then we're going to have to be involved in it. So my political story, I have to first give this caveat: I've never worked for a politician. I was not a staffer. I never really got into the political arena like that. I don't have a degree in political science. But as a young lawyer, I found myself being in a position to be able to raise money for judicial candidates. I was a trial lawyer, so I wanted to see good people who looked like me on these benches, and so that's what I did. And so I maybe thought later on in life that I would end up as a judge. But at some point down the road, as I was kind of talking to my wife one day, an individual was on city council who I'd gone to undergrad with. He decided he was going to run for mayor, and it opened up a city council seat. And my whole intentions were that once I ran for this city council seat and lost, then my name would be out there, and so I could run for state rep. Because I think that if you asked me 15 years ago what my passion was, and that would be access to higher education. And really for our demographic, I think that is the great equalizer for us. I think, all of us are blessed enough to not have to been hosed down with water hoses and bitten by dogs. So we don't have that story to tell. But we do have a story to tell about, and I know for me, being on a white undergraduate campus with 3% African Americans, and yet they still want to fly rebel flags and those types of things. So those are the things that kind of got me excited. But fast forward, I ran for this office and talked to some other people, and we all kind of discussed, well, when one of us is going to have to take on this state rep who had been a state rep probably since I was about 10 years old. And so I would be the test case, if you will. And this is what see, this is what your friends do for you, and your frat brothers. They put you out there and just say, okay, yeah, we got you, we got you. And of course, we're all thinking when I lose, then then we take you on and you run for the next seat. Well, long story short, the first race I ran for, I won. And so the rest is history, as they say. And so I found myself waking up after a runoff election saying, this job starts like in 3 weeks. I've got to be ready for that. So there was no big thing for me growing up saying, oh my God, I've got to be a politician. I'm growing up to be a politician. It just came from me wanting to be involved in my community. So that's what got me involved in politics. So Elijah, I can keep going, but you're the moderator here, so you tell me which direction you'd like to see me go.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good start. I don't know. Can you talk a little bit about maybe your transition from I would say Houston City Council as an at-large member into the controller's seat, and really a little bit about your interest in finances and that particular aspect and financial responsibility, accountability type of thing.
Got it. Well, for me, when I got on city council, I'm an at-large council member, and in Houston we had district council members, we had at-large council members. I do live in one of the traditionally African-American council districts, and we had a good able-bodied person there, so I didn't want to take on an incumbent. But as an at-large council member, I found myself in the position of being one, the only African-American male on council. I was the only African-American with a college degree on council. So I don't say that to make it seem like I'm this elitist who got on council. I said it to say this, is that I was on council with two 60-something-year-old women, black women, who fought for me to be on council, for me to go to white schools and that kind of stuff like that. So I kind of made this agreement with them, this unofficial agreement with them, is that, look, you fight for your districts, and I know that they're underserved districts, and what I will do is I will find out where the money is. I will track the money. And as a lawyer, that's what got me involved in the minutia of finance. And I guess the mayor got tired of me, always asking for the contracts that we voted on, sometimes all 952 pages of them, but really tracing the money, because I knew that if I could help these individuals who were fighting at the neighborhood level, if I could show them how to finance the projects that they wanted, then I think we all made a good team. So that's kind of what got me involved in the finance side, and consequently I was appointed the chairman of the Budget and Fiscal Affairs Committee. And I always liked to joke with those two women who were on council. I'd say, look, now while you're out there marching, I'm going to be inside, and while their backs are turned, I'm going to find out where the money is. And we say that jokingly, but it really worked out, so well for us, because, one, of course, when you're sitting in between these two women on city council and all you're hearing is, baby, go get this for me now, baby, go do this. It's kind of like sitting next to your grandmothers. But once again, I said I thought that was a good thing for me. One of the things I'd also add is that when I got on city council, I didn't have an MBA, but because I had a financially based law practice, I did a lot of white-collar criminal defense, and I represented a lot of doctors and did a lot of bank fraud and that kind of stuff. I found it necessary, not even necessary, but I found it advantageous for me to go back and get an MBA, because I don't care what sort of a situation you're in. When you look like me, you've always got to have the best bio out there. You've always got to have it on paper so that people people will try to test you in this position. And when I'm dealing with $19 billion on any given day, there's always someone who wants to test me. So I found for me that in order to put a box around all of this knowledge I was gaining by being on city council at age 33 in the fourth largest city in America, an MBA was a good way to do it. So that was kind of the transition for me, and then consequently running for the office. And I can tell you, when I was first elected in 2003, I had no intention of being the controller of the city.
Sorry, trying to figure out how to get off of mute here. Can you? I think with a lot of our folks, from an Urban League standpoint, classifying young professionals with the age range of 21 to 40 Yeah, I think you're very familiar with the Houston chapter down in the city of Houston. But can you talk a little bit about how specifically you navigated, the political and professional landscape of, being a politician, being a lawyer, um, within a large city like Houston, while being, in your early 20s, late 20s, early 30s, that particular age range.
Well, I think the best thing that Hall YP can do is to really kind of concentrate on that P. Well, you've got to be a good professional, I think, in order to lend some credibility on how you really navigate this whole political arena. And for me, the best thing that ever happened to me is I don't mind tooting my own horn. I spent a lot of time on becoming a good lawyer. And so consequently, I had a string of good clients who could vouch for me, who could vouch for my integrity, and who could vouch for my work ethic and the product that I put out. And I'm a firm believer that you just cannot really help somebody else if you can't help yourself first. And some people may think that's selfish, but I think that you have to position yourself to really be able to provide other opportunities for people. But if you don't have opportunities for yourself and you've not really set yourself apart, it's kind of tough to do. So as a young person navigating in a city like Houston, one of the good things that I had in my favor is that this is the city in which I grew up. I'm a native Houstonian, and so when I'm out and about in public, I'm always running into, I've got a huge family, always running into one of my parents' relatives or my relatives. I'm always running into some teacher who taught me. I'm always running into a church member. I'm always running into people that I know. And the common denominator in all of that is just being engaged in my community. I mean, I know my neighbors. I was involved in my neighborhood before I got involved in politics. I was involved in the Hall YPs. I was involved in the legal profession, the Black Bar Association, and that's another thing that I think people don't tend to take advantage of. And I often get asked the question: is there still a place for Hall YP? When you're dealing with African Americans, is there still a place for the Houston Lawyers Association, which is the Black Lawyers Association? Is there a place involved for Black finance professionals? And I really believe that a good place to gain some leadership skills and to gain some professional mentorship is in these organizations where people are really actually concerned about us growing up to kind of take over the world. So the navigation part, I think, is something that you constantly work on, because I still get tested. I'm still the youngest one in the room when I'm dealing with $19 billion. I'm still the darkest one in the room when I'm dealing with $19 billion. And part of that is, when all else fails, know your profession.
Yeah, no, I think that's great thoughts. I think a lot of folks sometimes forget that. You just kind of want to make it and do better, and I think we sometimes tend to forget that one way to doing better and being better and progressing in your career is to produce at what you do, be good at what you do, master your craft, and continue to learn, and I think we sometimes forget that. So I think those are some good thoughts. I'm going to kind of jump all around to kind of keep it keep it interesting, but not. I think you have great experience in terms of politics, great experience in terms of leadership, as well as business, owning your own law firm and that whole thing. Can you maybe share some of your greatest challenges in your profession, as well as some of the greatest opportunities that you've had, and how those might be applicable to early to mid-career professionals?
Well, one of the things that I think that we tend to, especially our age group, we tend to believe that we've made it, and that unfortunately, I'm sure there are a lot of us who don't, but there are some of us who believe that because we've gotten this job, in this Fortune 500 company, and the only other, African American they see is the woman emptying their trash. We kind of forget where we came from, and all of us didn't come from. Some of us are second and third generation college educated. Some of us may be the first ones to even get through high school, in your family. And I think for a mid-career professional, we can't get involved, get so caught up in this. We have a black president, everything's great now, and they respect us. If anything, I found that one, I certainly support my president, but I found that is so much more intimidating to people now than I think it ever was. Because for some people, the thought of the world being taken over by African Americans who actually are smart is sort of scary. So some of the successes or some of the things that I think that I'll talk about some of the challenges in the job. One, as I said before, is the age. One is when you're treading new ground. I'm the first African American to hold this position in the 175-year history of the city. So obviously there's that whole like, oh my God, it's a black man and they're dealing with the money. It is what it is. And when you look at the position itself, for the controller of the city of Houston, there are only two qualifications. It's one, you've got to be 18 years of age, which I barely meet that cutoff, and then you've also got to be, you have to live in the city of Houston. So it's a political CFO. But when you're used to having a CFO that just delivers proclamations or just kind of sits back and waits on all their deputies to just give you something to sign, the fact that you now begin to read things and you begin to look at audits, you begin to look at the numbers, that I think has been a more of a challenge for other people. And one of the things that you have to do in this sort of a position is it's very difficult to fire somebody who is your mother's age. And one of those that's part of all this whole maturation process is you've got to establish yourself as very humanistic, but you have to also establish yourself as the boss. And I don't mind doing that. And I think the transition for some of the people who worked for me was probably a little harder than it was for me, because I knew what the goals were and what I had to do. The successes of this job are the simple fact that I get to walk around a city in which I grew up and govern so many people who had so much of an impact on me. I can make a decision at 8 o'clock and it may have an effect by 5 o'clock that afternoon. I think that is probably one of the best things that has ever happened as a native Houstonian, to know that I've made a decision that affects my parents, I've made a decision that affects my neighbors, and that they can come and they can touch and feel me. That has been one of the greatest things out here. But the flip side of that too is when you are somewhat high profile, you become a target. And and I have the target on my back. I've had bad press. I've had all that. And especially when you are a high profile couple, like my wife and I, that could be a challenge. Trying to have a public marriage, if you will. And luckily, I've been in public office for 11 years. She's been in office for 7 years, but we've been together for 23 years. We've been together since we were 19 years old. So that's and still together. So those are that's a challenge, trying to do all of that. And then you add, when we first got into this political thing, we didn't have kids. And so trying to be a parent and really trying to keep well-grounded children is always a tough part too.
Yeah, and I think those are some thoughts we may want to come back to, because I think a lot of our folks are interested in you're a young professional, you're growing in life, growing in profession, and you want to be successful in your career as well as family, and I think I'm going to come back to some questions on how do you manage all that and still be a family man and a good husband and a good father kind of thing. But I want to I think our president President Richards has a question for you, so let her chime in.
So one of the things that you said was that you moved into a community and basically started the framework for something greater in that community because you all decided to go there. And you also talked about the fact that you ran for office without being a part of a political machine. So it sounds like there were some people in your circle, maybe friends, supporters, or what have you. You guys all got together and decided these are some things that we want to see happen, and this is how we're going to go about making those things happen. Can you talk about that process and maybe some of the concerns you guys may have had, some of the pitfalls, how you were able to trust one another in the process? Were people supporting each other financially? Like, what does that look like? Because a lot of our young professionals are in that space where they want to do something and they want to work collectively to do it, but they aren't quite sure how.
Got it. So for many of us, I think that we are probably all making more money than our parents ever made. I mean, I know I am. But I know that, and I say that, I mean, obviously, thankfully, that they did what they did. But my parents are like anybody else. You know, they work, they retired, they, you know, they're okay. My mom is not, I mean, they're okay. But with us, that's intimidating to that old guard. So there was this group of us that I talk about who all kind of got together. Well, I mean, we're 20-something-year-old lawyers. We, you know, owning our own businesses. I mean, we didn't have kids. We had, you know, small mortgages. We were, balling out of control. So we were, you know, spending money, which we probably we'll talk about that later. But we all were having fun, and we, you know, we didn't have young kids. We didn't have any of that. So when it came time for us to kind of make the rounds, we did the perfunctory, let's go kiss the ring and talk to a few people, and they're all, oh, okay, yeah, good luck. It was intimidating because for the most part, most of our African American elected officials had been in office, you know, since I was a young child. So the fact that there was finally this new group of people who said, okay, we're ready to come out of the box, we're ready to do something, you know, we'd like your help. And of course, when we didn't get it, we started writing our own checks. I don't think everybody can't do that, and you still are going to have to raise money, and it's a tough part of the job. I don't like to raise money, but you know, that first race, I mean, my wife and I were both lawyers. We, you know, we didn't have kids. I probably spent, you know, out of my pocket probably $75,000. You know, and that's a lot of money. I didn't really have it, but you know, at that point, you know, I didn't have all the other obligations that I have now. But I felt that if I were going to get out here, I had to invest in myself, because I knew that, you know, these people who were intimidated by me would also get out here and say, oh, we support you, but oh, we're not going to give you any money, or I'm afraid to, you know, give you some money because this person may, you know, get mad. Long story short, I think that what you all have that I have not had, or I didn't have, I'm probably one of the politicians who has embraced it. There's so many ways to communicate with your base. So before, when I first ran, you know, you had to raise a bunch of money from mail. You had to, you know, obviously you still have to knock on doors and those types of things, but I think you also get to be known probably a little easier than we did back in the day. So that was one of the big challenges. But with the advent of Instagram and Facebook and all of that, you know, we can all become Instagram famous overnight. And you know, and so you have to utilize that, I think, in the best way possible. And for me, you know, I communicate directly with my people. So those of you who are tweeting and you're watching these retweets, that's actually me hitting the retweet button and all that right now. But I think that's one of the things. So, but getting involved in the community, I think is a good thing. So for Hall YPers all across the country, you know, this political thing sounds good to a lot of people, and it is a tough, grueling, dirty business. I will say that. And for me, I will say one of the most disappointing things about this entire journey of politics for me is to finally get to meet some of the people that I revered so much, to finally get to know them. And some people may be saying that about me, but to, you know, these people that you grew up, you know, just in just this total reverence for. Oh my God, this is, you know, such and such, such and such. When you finally get to meet them, and not just meet them, when you finally get to know them and know how they stay in office and know how, and I'm not pointing any fingers, but that has been a little disappointing to me. The other thing that I think you run into, and especially being in a city that you grew up in, for many of us in that same little group, there was always a politician's son or daughter who was our age, who their parents always thought that they would take over that seat, and you know, and yada yada yada, and maybe when they get out of jail they will. But in the interim, the rest of us put our money up and we took the seats. So you know, you've always got that, and like I said, I think that one of the things that is disappointing is that you really believe that everybody's going to be with you. You know, you believe that, oh my God, you know, you did everything you were supposed to do, and they were all going to be behind you, and to find out that because of so much of the intertwining of people's mechanisms for eating was so intertwined with their politics that that disgusted me. And so that's why I always go back to make sure you can eat outside of politics. At the end of the day, I'm still a partner in my law firm. If I get voted out today, I get to eat. And I think that's what is so liberating about politics. So, you know, I hate the fact that people are so jaded and they think that, oh, it's all about money. It's about money to a certain degree, but I can honestly say I have not made a penny. In fact, I've lost a whole lot of money being in politics, but I still look at it this way: as I have so much more to do for my community that part is worth it. I will worry about it later. But for those of us who are all over the country, I would say get your group together, because that power that's in NULYP, I'm telling you, it's no secret why I got a lot of young friends and keep up with all my young cousins and all that stuff, and I'm Instagram famous for them. So, but I think that's one of the big things, is to just kind of get that base together and not to get discouraged by it.
Okay. I'm live. Okay, right. I think Chair Merriweather has a question or two from social media.
I do. So our first question comes from at Brainian Brown. What tips would you give a new treasurer with a passion to serve, but a small amount of finance experience?
Well, the first thing I would say is, as soon as they turn over those books to you, you get an audit done. so that if anything comes up, hey, it wasn't you. And I really believe that we kind of fall into this trap, and we all do this for free. And when we're involved in these organizations, and I've been the treasurer of many organizations, and people start with good intentions, but when you start, peeling back, as an auditor, I can tell you, when you start kind of pulling back some of the expenses, I'm not saying go out and try your best to get somebody indicted, but at least have some transparency there. And I think that's the best thing I would tell any new person. Just because you are not a finance professional does not mean that you cannot write the checks. I mean, I think most of us can balance a checkbook. You've got Quicken out there, but don't be afraid to spend a little money on some sort of an outside professional. And that way you protect yourself, you protect the organization, but you also minimize risk. You're mitigating risk. That's this whole thing with that. So I think that's probably one of the best things you can do. So don't be discouraged, because I tell everybody, I've got a psychology degree. And I didn't get an MBA until after I was dealing with billions of dollars. So.
Yeah. I'm live. Okay. Do you have any more?
I do.
Oh, go for it.
We have a great question from at Marissa Bartley. She currently serves as our Eastern Region Vice President, and her question is, how do we get our local chapter members to buy into the movement beyond their dues?
Well, it's a couple of things. I start from the premise that you can't make grown people do what they don't want to do. And you will. I'm 44 years old. I have been in many organizations, and I will just take my dear old fraternity. And Elijah, you can identify with this. We bring, when I was younger, we bring in, let's just say we brought in 15 people on a line. Well, we knew that only 5 of those were, maybe 8 would be, working as hard as those of us who invested all that time in bringing them in. Does that mean we become frustrated and we treat them any differently? Or no, it means that we try to find that one particular thing that they do well, and we put it in their lap, and we expect some accountability. Paying dues is great, but I think part of that is to throw the ball back at them and say, okay, what would you like to do? One of the things that I do in politics, and people love when you go out in public, and especially with Twitter and all this other stuff, people think they can say anything and do anything to you, and you won't respond. I'm sorry, but some of us do. But one of the things is that somebody will ask, and this is always the question for a politician. Well, what have you done? What have you done? Well, my question is this: what have you asked me to do that I didn't do? So if all you want to do is pay dues and sit in the back of the room, well, we probably will not ever do anything that will keep you interested, no matter how hard you try. But I bet you when it comes time for the success story, that person will be right there. So for the person who is doing just the minimum, it may involve some one-on-one, because honestly, this may be the first organization that these people have been involved in, and they may not know what the expectation is of a member. You know, we're not all in, you know, AARP or something like this where you just send your money in and you get a discount. I mean, while we like all that, but I really believe that you've got to have, and my politics is like this, you have to have a great mix of service and social, because you can't beat anybody over the head with every day, you know, we're going to go mentor, every day we're collecting canned goods. Sometimes, you know, Hall YP in Houston has been known to, you know, throw a nice little party or two. So, you know, but you got to get them involved in there. So I wish there was an easy fix to that. But, you know, once again, you know, there may be some people who all they give is money. Take it, but you know, you try to get them engaged.
Yeah, I think those are great points, and you know, I think you know, as you work more and more in, you know, organizations like the, you know, National Urban League Young Professionals and its chapters around the countries and fraternities, sororities, the whole nine yards, you know, you start to learn, you know, leadership from a different angle. I think, you know, in terms of, you know, really encouraging and convincing people to kind of go above and beyond, you know, their normal duties that they, you know, in essence would get paid for on a daily job, but you know, aren't quite get paid for, you know, in these types of organizations. So I know we probably asked a lot of questions about like leadership and politics, and I know some of our you know, chapter treasurers you know, may have some interest in some additional tips, you know, from a financial standpoint. You kind of hit on transparency and you know, things like that. Any you know, do you have maybe, you know, 2 or 3, you know, pointers, you know, from a financial standpoint, that might be of benefit to some of our treasurers, you know, keeping in mind that you know, we have, you know, over 60 plus chapters around the country, and you know, some large, some small. You know, some are working with different degrees or different sums of money, and you know, turning water into wine and all that good stuff. You know, do you have any financial tips, you know, that you would recommend on top of transparency, that, you know, folks should focus on and be cognizant of when serving in, you know, a treasurer's type role?
I think, you know, treasurers and CFOs of any organization, those roles are becoming, I think, more and more important, in that that is the person who not only has to be transparent about it, but you've got to be able to communicate to your members. And it used to be that, you know, people think that we sit in the corner and use our calculator and that's it, you give the report. But I think you've got to be able to communicate to your members really the financial state of your organization, so that people like yourselves and Madam President and your executive board can make long-range decisions based on the financial state of the organization. As a treasurer in these organizations, I think your role sometimes becomes a you know, a fundraiser. You probably need to have some of those skills, or at least be able to articulate the need for the rest of the group raising funds. I think that's always important. But I also think, as I said before, I think disclosure is really a very large part of this job. Is you've got this duty of continuing disclosure. You know, what has happened since the last budget cycle? Where have we spent? What, you know, really sometimes you have to make an assessment as a treasurer. And I know sometimes, you know, a president may want to look at the treasurer and say, look, no, you just write the checks. I'll give you my opinion on really the efficacy of doing something. Or some of these fundraisers, you know, did we lose money? Did we lose our shirts? You know, what did we gain? What was the cost-benefit analysis? And and to the person who asked the question earlier, you still don't have to be a finance professional to really sit down and just take a retrospective look at some of the activities of the organization to determine where you need to spend more of your resources, whether that's time or money, or where you need to spend less. And I think that's always something that the treasurer can do, and they can provide that great sense of guidance for it. So I once again, the treasurer, I think, goes hand in hand with the president, making sure that not only are you know, serving in a fiduciary role, but, you know, at the end of the day, in any of these organizations, and it's one thing that I always say in my profession, that behind every dollar there's a person, and so we've got to make sure that are we touching the people that we want to touch. with those dollars.
Yeah, appreciate that. I got a couple more questions, and then I think we're gonna, wrap it up. One thing I really want to hit on is I think I mentioned it before I turned the floor over to Brandy. Is really how do you find a good balance in managing, um, managing your career, a business, all the civic things you do, being a good husband, being a good father, and being present at, at whatever it is. I think that's always, um, something that young professionals sometimes forget is how to have a good balance and have a social life as well as, continue to grow professionally and what have you. So, any thoughts?
Yeah, I will first be I'll be the first person to say that sometimes I'm not a good business person, sometimes I'm not a good parent, sometimes I'm not a good husband, sometimes I'm not a good all of that, because I certainly don't want anybody to believe that I'm Superman. And I know when I'm like anybody else. Yeah, my wife just she just texted me now. But so I know when there are opportunities for me to do better. And I think that that's something that you've got to recognize, that it does take work to balance it all. It's not just 30% of my time is dealt over here, 30% is there, 30% is here. It's not. You've got to kind of know what's important. And obviously, I'm always going to put my family first. And the fact that I am not one of these politicians who has this wife who just kind of is at home and cooking and this. I mean, my wife has a career, which Hall YP, you all are professionals, male and female. So the good thing about it is I can say no to some things, and that comes along with being in this arena for a while, because I have a firm belief that people who cannot take no because I am dealing with my family, then those are some votes I'm going to have to lose. But those are people who probably don't have a lot of respect for me, as a member of the community, because as a member of the community, I got to take care of my own family. I got to take care of, I got parents. We've got to do all that. So I would tell a person that, you can get totally consumed in politics on a day-to-day basis. But if you want to have a good quality of life, I've seen, divorces come and go. I've seen people's kids, go by the wayside, all because at the end of the day, you wanted to at least appear to be a good politician. It's not worth it. Luckily, I have been in a situation where, one, living in the hood is very good because I don't live far from City Hall or my law firm. That's always a good thing. But just the balance. My wife and I, we do things together. So, if we've got to go to events together, we'll do that. But we also have our own private time. The other thing is, as a parent, I mean, most people know my son. He comes with me to meetings. If I waited till I got off to start parenting, then that'd be 18 years from now. So I just think that you've got to really look at it and see what works for you. There are some people who can do this and they want to remain single and they just want to give it all to an organization. That's fine too. But just make sure that you have a good quality of life. And I do believe that there is a misnomer about being able to serve your community but yet having a good time. Because people in Houston know I like to have a good time, and I do, and I say that in the most respectful way. In that, I mean, what connection would we have with Hall YP? I mean, I'm not one of these types of politicians that when I walk into some club or I go to a club, but I'm not walking in there with certificates saying we're going to proclaim it whatever day. That's not me. I'm going to go in. I'm going to have a good time. I don't travel with an entourage. I don't travel with security, in most instances. But people want to be able to touch and feel you. So if they feel that you go to, their church, and I've been at the same church for 20 years. I mean, my church members know me. All it's a 17,000 member church, but those people watched me grow up in my church. So it's not a big deal to have the city controller come to church. They'll still talk to me and they're proud of me and yada yada, but they still want to know that I do regular things that they do. And I think that if you put on this big front and all you do is, from the time you wake up in the morning, you're delivering a proclamation to the time you go to bed at night, it'll catch up with you.
Okay. Chair Merriweather, are there any more social media questions out there?
Not at this time.
Okay. Well, I think I have one closing question, and then I'll turn it over to President Richards to give some closing remarks. I mean, I think so. So a lot of our folks, and I would say all of our folks, would consider themselves leaders, and I think they should consider themselves leaders. When you decide to step out and be a chapter president of an Urban League chapter, be a treasurer of an Urban League chapter, whatever it is, you've kind of put yourself out on the limb and, stretched yourself, wanted to grow, and stepped up to the plate to deal with the, many challenges that comes with, leading your peers, and leading, in various environments, some of which you talked about, being young, being black, and stepping up to the plate and doing some big things. From your standpoint, a couple of things. Do you have maybe 3 to 5 things that priorities or thoughts that you would say are important in leadership, that folks should be mindful of when they're leading or as a leader, and on top of that, it's always the question that someone asks when you go somewhere, or you have someone like yourself. Do you recommend any particular books or things along those lines in terms of leadership, in terms of politics, and even for the real hardy financial folks out there in terms of finances?
Got it. So a couple of things, just the leadership characteristics. As you said before, I think the decision to get involved in these organizations, that shows that you care about someone other than yourself. I think you've got to have the integrity to do this, because obviously if you are doing these things for the wrong reasons, it will show. I think we all would agree that some of these jobs are thankless. It is absolutely rewarding, but if you're looking, to everybody to pat you on the back and get all, get your fulfillment, and then that's what makes you sleep at night, or that's what really raises your self-esteem, then it's probably not for you. I would say that you definitely want to have some integrity about this. You want to do it for the right reasons, be genuine about it. I think one of the things that's always important is that people will want to know that they'll take you at your word, and we all know that we can't do everything, and I think people will appreciate you saying, no, I can't do that, as much as they will appreciate you doing what you say you're going to do. And that's just being, honest about it. And leaders are really transparent, and I think that also leaders are the types of people who know when to be followers. Because a lot of times, the difference between a leader and just really a manager is, will you do it along with your people? Will you be out there, doing the job that you're asking someone else to do? And I don't have any problem doing that at all. The flip side is that when you're looking at what books I read, I think for me, I will be the first to tell anybody the one book that I read, and that's the Bible. And so if you, because I really, at the end of the day, I'm not trying to go to hell or jail. So it's important. But I kind of start the morning off. And now that we have, all the blogs and we have all the Twitter and Facebook, I kind of start off with things like the Bond Buyer. My TV normally in my office, which is right over here, normally stays on Bloomberg all day. And not that I'm just so much of a finance geek all the time, but I think even for a non-finance professional, just to kind of hear what's going on out there in the markets and how they affect us on a day-to-day basis, it's always good to watch something. Whether you're watching Squawk Box in the morning or something like that. But also for those of us at the local level, watch your local news. Know what's going on in your community. I think that's important. And obviously, reading. Reading is still very important, and it just depends on what motivates you. If you're not a person who cares about finances to the degree that I do, well, just reading for the sake of reading and telling somebody, oh, I just read the Wall Street Journal. Hey, what about that? You know, that doesn't mean anything. I think just really being learned and being learned in anything is always good, and just really being able to articulate in different settings, because a leader is well-rounded. At the end of the day.
Yeah. Well, I think if we can agree on nothing today, I think we can all agree that hell and jail are two bad places that we don't want to go. So I have some closing thoughts, but I'll yield the floor to our national president, President Richards, for some closing remarks.
So thank you very, very much. Will we call you the Honorable?
No, you call me Ronald.
Thank you so much, Ronald Green, for sharing with us not only about your position and what it took to get there, but also some of your struggles and some human things that we need to know as individuals as we work with our families and serve this movement, because sometimes it is challenging to do so. And the leadership characteristics and things that we could take back and study and learn. Sometimes I don't watch the news enough because it depresses me, but I'll make sure that I'm watching the news every day moving forward. So thank you for your time. Elijah, this has been awesome. I think there are quite a few tools that our young professionals are able to take away from this session. Thanks to Jeremy and Michelle and the rest of the team and those of you on Twitter who asked questions and were engaged today. You're growing because you've availed yourself of an opportunity to sit at the feet of someone who knows more than you or has experienced more than you. And so you should be commended for making that step and taking that effort. So thanks for coming out. Elijah, I'll give it back to you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and so I completely echo all of those thoughts. Thanks Ron and John Guess, his loyal staffer who's hiding back there in the background there. But no, definitely thanks for your time. For having a late night at the office. Hope we can get you in trouble tonight with the wife. But
no, I'm already in trouble, so I'm gonna run on over to the Rockets really quickly.
Yeah, well, thanks, and definitely a big shout out to Chair Johnson and Chair Merriweather for their assistance on the social media side as well as the technology side. We couldn't have done this without you guys. I'm sure I bothered you enough for the week. So again, hey, thanks everyone. I hope this was enjoyable and you guys got some good nuggets out of this. And look forward to having you back, Ron, in perhaps a different capacity.
Definitely. Good luck, you guys.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Thank you.